There's the Magi.
Get him! Kill him! Die!
Kill your friend and I'll take care of the Magi.
You are supposed to be dead. And you will be. We'll make sure of that.
Long story short, the visuals are good, the story and characters are meh, the combat is shit. This, unfortunately, is Assassin's Creed Origins. Don't even try to enjoy this one. Ugh. So another year, another Assassin's Creed game, and we're still not in feudal Japan for some reason. Although at this point I count that as a blessing in disguise because they probably just fuck it up. My first 2 hours of this game were abysmal. The story starts in the middle of, well, I don't know. I feel like we've skipped a bit somewhere. Did someone turn over 2 pages at once? The combat feels immediately awkward.
You will pay, corpse! Yeah!
Then, 45 minutes in, this happened. An hour and 20 in, this happened.
Our Magi, you're back.
Whoa.
Out of the way!
What are you doing?
And I'm confused. Are we in the present? Or is it the past? Why does the game keep switching between 2 timelines like this? And where's the modern times, you know, with Abstergo, the Animus? Oh, there it is. Now, thankfully that crash only happened once, and that weird locking up when you were on horseback, that only happened to me twice. And after 2 hours, the game finally deigns to go back to a linear storyline instead of flitting back between past and present, as if the game thinks that's clever. It's not, it's confusing. Okay, so let's compliment the game before I get really annoyed with it. It's not the best looking game I've ever seen, but the graphics are good. And Egypt looks great. There's rolling sand dunes, wide city streets, you've got narrow alleyways, fields of green crops, blue flowers, red flowers. Who knew Egypt was so colourful? Well, I did. But even knowing that, even I still associate Egypt with sand, pyramids, that kind of thing. It's still nice to be able to see all the colour though. Your horse has an autopilot feature that allows you to let it do all the work of taking you from place to place, and you can just sit there and admire the view as you ride along. You have a companion eagle that follows you everywhere, Senu, and she flies above you constantly. It's basically a replacement for eagle vision. Instead of looking at enemies and they glow bright red, allies glow in bright blue, targets in bright gold, instead of doing that, you simply look at things from an eagle's perspective, quite literally, guiding her around in the sky, and spotting targets, treasure chests, secret doors, all sorts of things. And here's something I've never encountered in an Assassin's Creed game before: a loot system. The game's loot system is not unlike an RPG, as in weapons have to be at or below your level to be equipable. There are 7 styles of melee weapons, 4 styles of bow, and the loot is constantly fed to you through loot chests, enemy drops, all sorts of things. And each one of these different weapons has very different characteristics, making them sort of useful in various situations for a given value of usefulness. Cue angry rant. This game's combat is horrible. Horrible. The problem is how can I describe it? It's the best thing I can come up with is that it's like Soulsborne, but they didn't bother to polish it, or it's really, really rough. You give a command and the command is obeyed most of the time, the vast majority of the time, but sometimes you're not quite sure. It's kind of like Nathan Drake in the original Uncharted game, where you order him to take cover behind an object, and because the animation is the same as him running in that direction anyway, you're not quite sure if he's going to take cover or not. Your character kind of does that with their animations. You're not quite sure if your orders are going to be obeyed when you give them. And the enemies, some enemies just have a single sword or a single bow, and then you get enemies with small shields, like the kind of shield you can equip, and they're not too difficult to break the guard of. You use a single heavy attack and their guard breaks. And then you get the guys with tower shields. Ugh. The only way to break a tower shield defense is to use a charged heavy attack to hold the button down, and you have to buy the ability first for some bloody minded reason. But it takes about a whole second to charge this heavy attack in order to break their guard, and there's no visual cue until you do it. It's like you will have your weapon in your hand like that, and you hold the button down and start charging, and then a second later your character will flip it to like that and the weapon will glow, and then you know it's charged. But there's no cue apart from that. If you press the button too early, you don't know that the attack's charged. And the enemy, they don't give you any warning that an attack is incoming. They can just, a lot of the time, these shielded enemies, they just charge their attack at a distance, and then they move towards you and then suddenly unleash it, and you're not prepared for it. I know that you can use the counter against them, but you're not prepared for it when it happens because you're not getting the visual cues. And there's no other way of breaking their defense. You can't evade around their side and attack them from the flank. They keep perfect tabs on you. The combat system, why this system uses a lock-on feature which causes you to try to fight enemies one-on-one when entire forts can have 1, 2 or 3 dozen enemies in them. Soulsborne's mechanic assumes that you're fighting enemies in small groups, otherwise you get your ass kicked. This game just throws huge clusters of enemies at you and doesn't seem to give a shit. It's like they jammed an intimate combat system into a game where there's fucking loads of enemies. It doesn't work. And then they didn't polish the damn thing. It's awful. Awful. Okay, so I've got that rant off my chest. What else? Well, apart from the loot, there's also upgrades that you have to craft. And you craft them by gaining soft, hard skins, furs, gems, wood, metal, and each upgrade does something different. It bolsters your defense, bolsters your attack in some way, ammunition. The upgrades do various things, but the number of resources that you have to collect to make these upgrades, it's ridiculous. I mean, by the time your body armor is at the highest levels, you're having to collect like 25 light skins, 30 heavy skins, 20 furs, and a couple of gems. Where are all these resources going, for Christ's sake? Does it really need that many resources to craft what is effectively, looks to me like just a neck brace? There are lots of side missions, as you might expect for a massive open world game. And I don't normally criticise games for putting lots of side content in, even if they is technically filler. But Jesus Christ, this felt really, really forced. Now, I'm a completionist. I naturally go after all the side content in a game. I do. I can't help myself. But this game, the way it's set up is that side missions require you to grind. The problem is that the leveling system requires you to be a certain level to match the level of the mission. But you don't get enough XP from the main missions in general to hit those higher levels. So you have to go off and do the side activities whether you want to or not. So you end up doing it. So they're not side activities. They're stuff you have to do. The game forces them down your throat. I remember in Assassin's Creed 1 where there were like 6 side missions per assassination and you didn't have to do most of them. But they had interesting little story tidbits about your assassination target, and they had little clues like there's a secret entrance here, or the bad guy takes this patrol route or is standing here, or the enemy archers are positioned in these locations. It helped you either understand your target or how to get to them. And this game's side content just doesn't do that. They're totally separate, effectively, from the main campaign, but you still have to do them. You've no option, otherwise you're never going to be a high enough level to do those missions. Side missions can include events, things like chariot racing, which is, by the way, terrible. I mean, why would you automate ramming your opponents? What's wrong with just crashing into them? There's a gladiator arena, but given the crappiness of the combat, I wouldn't recommend it. There's smashing statues, synchronising viewpoints, collectathons, all the usual busy work. The story and the characters are okay, but they're dull. There are a couple of story moments that are kind of cool in the game. For example, your pet eagle, SOOOO, she's flying overhead, kind of tells you where eagle vision came from. There's the moment where Bayek loses a finger, and traditionally the assassins remove a finger so that they can, well, at least in Altair's era, I mean, by the time Ezio comes around, the hidden blade's been modified so you don't have to do that, but it's nice to see where that missing finger thing came from. And, oh yeah, and also where, you know where Altair used to dab the victim's blood onto the feather? It's nice to see where that came from as well. They've kind of tied it, even if it is kind of retconning it. Bayek uses the feather. In Egyptian mythology, the feather holds all of your sins and it has to weigh less than a certain amount, and if it isn't, you're screwed. So all that tying in, it's nice, but apart from those occasional moments, I'm indifferent to the story and the characters. I don't really care all that much. And let's not forget the microtransactions. Yeah, of course, because every fucking game nowadays has microtransactions and usually loot boxes. This game doesn't. I can't, at least this time, call it gambling because you can actually see what you're buying. You buy the bullshit currency and you can actually spend it on individual items to use in the single player. The only problem is that the stuff you can get from the marketplace you can get in-game. Okay, you can't get specific outfits, but frankly, all the outfits are drab and dull. Apart from Altair and Ezio's outfits. Yeah, they're still pushing those classic outfits as if they're desperate to push the nostalgia card on you. It's like every single one of these games has to have those classic 2 outfits because those are the games that everyone liked. I'm sorry, I don't want the classic outfits in these games. I really don't. I don't want those fond memories tarnished. I don't want Bayek wearing Ezio's outfit. You're not fooling me. I mean, if you put Ezio's outfit on, I know this is blue, but if you put the outfit on, it's still Bayek underneath it. You're not changing that. You're not making your game miraculously better by doing that. And the weapons, and, you know, the mounts and shields and everything, they're exotic that you can get from the marketplace, but you get exotics in-game, especially if you solve those papyrus puzzles. You solve those, you invariably get rares and exotics. And another thing about this game, you don't have to worry about your favourite weapons, whether it be a rare, exotic, whatever, being out-leveled by other stuff. I mean, they do get out-leveled, but you can always take them to a blacksmith in-game and use some of your in-game, I think it's drachmas, is the in-game currency. You can use some of your cash anyway to upgrade your old level, low-level equipment to the higher levels. You can upgrade, say, a level 10 weapon to your current level. If your current level is 20, you can bring it up to your level. You never have to get rid of your favourite weapons. As long as you have enough cash, and it is expensive for exotics, but as long as you have enough cash, you can keep your favourite weapons throughout the whole game. You don't need to buy exotics from the marketplace, especially not at £2 each. Fuck that. And the season pass, I haven't even bothered to look at it. I'm just like, no. Although I will admit, the undead expansion, at least that's what it looks like, that actually looks cool. You're not going to get me to buy the season pass though. That's still not going to happen. When all said and done, I didn't like this game. I've complained a lot about the combat, which is shit, definitely. Assassinations aren't much better, because the whole thing isn't very smooth, and when there's a lot going on screen, the frame rate dips considerably. I'm not a frame rate snob. I can live with 30 frames a second. I don't need 60. But when it dips substantially below 30 frames a second, add to that the choppy combat, you can barely see what's going on in a fight. And let's be honest, fighting is a big part of this game, especially the assassinations, and this game just didn't do it for me. It's a big disappointment. Assassin's Creed Origins gets a 4 out of 10. It's below average, and I never want to play it again. I'm serious. I will be trading this back pretty quickly. I do not like this one. If I want a good Assassin's Creed game, may I recommend, if you're a fan of pirates, then definitely number 4, Black Flag. But in particular, maybe the original game. But for me, I will always hold AC2 and AC Brotherhood as being my favourites. And this just doesn't compare. This just doesn't compare. I'll tell you something else this game does as well. You know how in AC1, where I'm pretty sure that there was an assassination at one point in that game where there was a guy who'd been deliberately spreading a disease among people or something like that, and Altair obviously comes in, assassinates him, and goes, "You've been spreading this disease among people deliberately," and he goes, "Yeah, I was trying to cure it, trying to find more out about it." And AC1 was great at balancing that sort of moral grey area, walking that narrow tightrope. It was great at that. Nowadays, we get bad guys that have like, "You poisoned a whole village. It was in the name of the greater good."
The greater good.
Bullshit. No, you poisoned a whole village. You're dead. Gone. Next. Boring. Do you think that there's even the remotest, tiniest possibility that we might actually get back to a good Assassin's Creed game at some point? I mean, I know that Black Flag divided people because some people didn't like spending so much time on the boat, on the ocean and that kind of stuff. But it was a picture of perfection next to this game. I mean, recently Assassin's Creed games have been shit. I thought that this might be a good point to jump back into it. It isn't. It isn't. Skip this one. Don't know. Pass it over. Egypt can't save it. I dare say that if the game was like this, then, again, what I was saying earlier, feudal Japan wouldn't have saved it, but it's like, the series has fallen so far. The series has fallen so far since the good old days of AC2, the Renaissance trilogy, even Black Flag. I'll even give AC3 props for changing the old puppeteering concept of the control system to a more modern control system, made it easier to control, more accessible. Despite the lousy story and taking half the game to get to the good stuff. I know, but yeah. This is not the game you want to jump back into this franchise with. It's not. Skip. Moving on. Hopefully I'll get some good games before the year ends. See you next time.